My name is Satish Jha, and I've been running this one laptop per child for some time in India. Glad to see Peter talked about this, and one thought that came to my mind, Peter, is this. When we look at something from the perspective that we already have, and which is something new, then there will be some translation problems. And that's why I thought maybe it's a good idea to talk about how it emerged. MIT Media Lab and some people like Seymour Papert or Jean Piaget, they have been looking at education and technology for several years. Piaget, of course, was the guru. Papert was later one. And they looked at the question of how children respond to technologies. Over about 30 plus years of looking at multiple countries from Cambodia, Laos to Latin America to Africa, they looked at how children respond to screens or technologies or keyboards or whatever. 2001, I founded Baramati Conference, which was in somewhere near Pune, and I called Negroponte. One year it was Craig Barrett of Intel, another year was Negroponte, and he started talking about how cell phones had become then so popular. In 1995, India's telecom minister would have told you, in 2020, we'll be lucky to have 2% Indians using cell phones, or any phone. Sorry, there was no cell phone. And by 2001, cell phones had actually crossed the number of plain old telephone systems. And today we have, in terms of numbers, virtually 70% India's population having access to cell phones. So in other words, some lessons, what could not be achieved with policy could be achieved with some technological breakthroughs, number one. Number two, the impact could be virological. And you did not need to teach people. They will find their way, even those who had lost the capacity to actually use their skills, the human skills that we have, which range from being invalid to having multiple Nobel Prizes in the same lifetime. That's the kind of range of skills we have. But we lose them if you don't use them as we go along. So even if they didn't have any skills, they could still use cell phones. Before that, we had seen illiterate women. They could use video TVs, many technologies which are so alien to them. So we said, okay, what is constraining using these technologies in India's education sector or for the poor in general? Can we do cell phone of education? What's the constraints? Constraints are there's no power. So let us make a computer which takes no power. What is no power? We'll come to that later. What else? Well, there are no school buildings. So let's make something which doesn't require buildings, which can be without buildings. There are no desks to begin with, no chair. Let's do something which doesn't require desk, doesn't require chair. Well, even if you did that, what will that be? Well, something which can obviously, be movable. So what will that be? Maybe it's a laptop. If it's a laptop, the children are going to take it outside. Okay, then they'll drop it. Let's make it drop-proof, shock-proof. Well, if they drop it or take it out and suddenly rains come, what happens then? Well, let's make it rainproof, waterproof. But villages have dust. Let's make it dust-proof. Any question that anybody with any experience of any education, villages of India or anywhere in the world, whatever questions they came up with in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, every single question that humankind posed, I'm talking about humankind. I'm not saying one MIT professor or one president of a country or one school teacher. Any question posed by any human being was mapped out. And to each of those from the learning point of view of a child, how does a child learn at age 5? How will I make a child at age 5 become, despite every deprivation possible, become as good as the best in terms of learning? You can't socialize them. I can't give them Manhattan civilization. I can't give them Prithviraj Road or Delhi or Kapil Sibal civilization. But I can give them the best learning tool possible. Is it possible? That's how the whole thing began. Stage 2. Well, it requires money, resources. Well, we have academic, we have 70 scientists who are the best in the world. They define the field in which they are. They have contributed 40% to the creation of information technology revolution in this planet Earth. 40% of everything you see, 90% of all screen, they came from the same lab. We put them, 70 people, 70 scientists of the world's best scientists. You can't buy them for any amount of money. If you want to produce them, they don't happen overnight. It takes a culture to create them. We said technology is global. It's not American, it's not Chinese, it's not Indian, technology is human. Let's have that. 70 scientists, 3,000 engineers. And then Negroponte went out and he had an amazing charm. He still is known in America as one professor who has raised more money than anyone else in American environment so far. He raised $250 million of grant to design this. And then we designed it, 2005, Kofi Annan showcased it in Tunis, WSIS that was called then. And then many governments came forward, they said, we'll move forward. And then there was a question about pedagogy. Government of India, in its own wisdom, decided that pedagogy was suspect. But what was pedagogy? What happened is, but it didn't exist then. We created it in 2007. But 2006, some joint director in some godforsaken cubicle in some part of India said, pedagogy is suspect. Government of India secretary wrote, pedagogy is suspect, minister is suspect. Now, that's how governments decide. So it became suspect. Uruguay decided, President of Uruguay met us in February 2008. He said, I want every Uruguay child to have it, and I want it done in 2 years' time. How long will it take, Nick? Well, you can do it in 1, make it 2. In 19 months, every single Uruguayan child had this machine, and now the 100% concentration. The idea was this. When ex-Prime Minister of Australia asked me, how do you make Australia creative? I said, you can't. For creativity, you have to have an anguish. You should desire to do something. What desire an Australian has? By the time you come to college, 3rd year, you already have a job waiting for you. Why would you be creative? But I said, but you can be creative, and you can try it out. If children begin to learn like this laptop is, the moment you hand it over, it's not an answer to anything. A child begins to open it, and that itself is a learning. Every single thing you do is a learning. If you want to explore a city driving in a taxi, will you ever get to know a city? So this is like going to a city and renting a car and beginning to drive yourself. You get to know a city better than the city people who lived there because you are curious about it. They have become used to it. So idea was that you can make those who have resources curious and creative with it. Those who have no resources, make them as good as the best that is possible in the world in terms of learning and thinking. Kill the rote learning is the basic idea. 2 plus 2 is 4. How about if you add 2 and 2? I don't know. 2 plus 2 is 4, but what if you add 2 and 2? I don't know. So that's the learning India gave. I'll give you a small example of a professor of Harvard who went to study a blue ribbon school in America, which is supposed to be a good school. And he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. He said, when I went to the class, I saw a teacher asking questions. One hand used to go up. After some time, that hand stopped going up. And then teacher began answering. And then he says in frustration, I don't want an America where teacher answers a question. Now that's a creative society. That's why they get 493 Nobel Prizes. How many does India have? Sorry about that. I want my education minister not to tell problems